Let me tell you something that most people don't want to hear when they're hurting. Blocking feels strong. It feels like you're taking your power back. It feels like you're saying, I'm done, but I want you to understand this clearly. Blocking him doesn't hurt the way you think it does. Not blocking him hurts 10 times more. Let me explain why blocking someone gives them closure too easily. When you block him, it feels like you're finally standing up for yourself. It feels decisive. It feels final. What you don't realize is that finality works in his favor more than yours. Blocking draws a clear line and answers every question he might have had. It tells him the story is over, the chapter is closed, and he doesn't have to think about it anymore. He doesn't have to sit with uncertainty. He doesn't have to wonder how you're feeling. He doesn't have to reflect on what he did wrong because you already ended it for him. Closure is comfortable. People crave it. When you block someone, you hand them peace without them earning it. They don't have to deal with guilt slowly building. They don't have to feel the absence stretch over time. They don't have to confront moments where they reach for their phone and realize you're no longer responding the way you used to. You've removed the discomfort instantly, and discomfort is what forces growth. Blocking also shifts the focus away from behavior and onto reaction. Now the story becomes about you blocking him, not about what he did to deserve distance in the first place. It gives him a way to rationalize the situation. He can tell himself you were emotional, impulsive, dramatic, or overreacting. That narrative protects his ego and allows him to move on without accountability. When you don't block him and you simply stop engaging, there's no need ending, there's no clear explanation, there's no emotional outburst to dismiss. There's just space, and space makes people think. It makes them replay conversations. It makes them question assumptions. It makes them feel the slow realization that something has changed and they're not in control of it. Blocking is a loud statement. Silence is a quiet one. Quiet statements last longer. Loud actions burn fast and fade. Quiet actions linger. When someone can still see that you exist but can't access you the way they used to, it creates a tension that blocking never does. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know where they stand. And that uncertainty keeps the situation alive in their mind. Closure should come from understanding, not from cutting cords in anger. When you block out of hurt, you're reacting, not deciding. And reactions are temporary. Decisions are permanent. Silence gives you time to decide without locking yourself into an emotional choice you might later question. Most importantly, blocking too quickly robs you of your own growth. It bypasses the discipline of emotional control. It gives you instant relief, but it doesn't teach you how to sit with discomfort, how to detach without bitterness, how to walk away calmly. And those skills matter far beyond one person. Blocking ends the story fast. Silence lets the truth reveal itself slowly. Let me tell you why silence creates a deeper emotional impact than any argument ever could. When you speak, explain, or confront, you give the other person something to hold on to. You give them words to twist, emotions to analyze, and reactions to justify their behavior. Conversation keeps things alive on the surface. Silence pushes everything underneath, where the truth actually lies. When you go silent without blocking, it disrupts expectations. People are prepared for anger. They're prepared for tears. They're prepared for accusations and long messages. What they're not prepared for is nothing. No explanation, no reaction, no emotional access. And when expectations are disrupted, the mind goes into overdrive trying to fill in the gaps. Silence removes control. When you're reacting, the other person still feels influential. They know what to say to trigger you. They know how to pull a response out of you. But when you stop engaging, that influence disappears. They don't know what you're thinking anymore. They don't know how you feel. They don't know where they stand. and uncertainty is deeply uncomfortable. See, words can be dismissed, but silence cannot. If you argue, they can say you're emotional. If you explain, they can say you're overthinking. If you block, they can say you're immature. But silence leaves no label. There's nothing to attack, nothing to debate, nothing to blame. Just a noticeable absence that keeps showing up in quiet moments. Silence forces reflection because there's no distraction. There's no conversation to redirect attention. There's no conflict to focus on. There's just time, and time brings memory. They remember how you used to show up, how you used to care, how you used to be present, and now that presence is missing. That's when the impact sinks in. When you stay silent, you also protect your dignity. You don't lower yourself into emotional exchanges that go nowhere. You don't say things you'll later regret. You don't chase understanding from someone who may never be capable of giving it. You let your absence communicate what words never could. Silence also changes you. It teaches you restraint. It teaches you patience. Teaches you that not every feeling needs immediate expression. You start realizing how powerful it is to sit with emotions instead of dumping them on someone who caused them. You become less reactive and more intentional, and that shift is noticeable. People often confuse silence with weakness, but silence requires strength. It requires emotional maturity. It requires confidence in your worth without needing constant validation. When you stop explaining yourself, you signal that you trust your decision enough not to defend it. Silence also reveals intentions. If someone truly cares, they'll feel the distance and try to close it with effort, not excuses. If they don't, the silence will expose that too. Either way, you gain clarity without exhausting yourself. And here's the truth most people avoid. Silence doesn't just affect the other person. It frees you. It breaks the habit of emotional dependence. It stops you from seeking closure through conversation and teaches you to create closure through understanding. You stop waiting for answers and start watching behavior. Silence isn't about winning, it's about peace. It's about choosing emotional stability over temporary relief. And when you choose silence with intention, it speaks louder than anything you could ever say. Let me explain why access equals comfort and why removing it can create the kind of discomfort that makes people think twice about their actions. Most people don't realize how much they take for granted the people who are always available to them. When someone knows they can reach you anytime, text you anytime, talk to you anytime, they relax. They stop checking themselves. They stop considering how their words or actions affect you. Comfort creates a sense of security, and security often leads to carelessness. They assume you will always be there, no matter what they do, and that assumption is dangerous for your peace. When you give unrestricted access, you give someone the freedom to take without consideration. They can be late with responses, ignore your feelings, make mistakes, and assume that your presence will cover for them every time. They don't have to worry about boundaries because they know your energy is always available. But energy is precious, and giving it away without reciprocity slowly drains you. Access, when taken for granted, becomes a tool that shifts power away from you and into their hands. Removing access doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to block. You don't have to argue. You simply step back. You stop responding immediately. You stop giving constant updates about your life. You stop being an emotional crutch. And suddenly, the comfort they relied on is gone. That absence creates tension, and tension forces reflection. For the first time, they realize that their actions have consequences. They realize that you are not an infinite resource to be used at will, and that realization is powerful. When access is removed, the void becomes noticeable in everyday life. Things they once counted on, your attention, presence, your engagement, are no longer guaranteed. They start checking for signs. They start asking questions internally. Why isn't she responding the way she used to? Why does it feel different now? Why do I feel the emptiness where her presence used to be? That void becomes a mirror, reflecting their choices back at them without you having to say a word. Silence combined with absence communicates more than arguments ever could. Removing access also teaches self-respect. When you step back and limit your availability, you prioritize your peace over someone else's convenience. You stop bending over backwards for validation. You stop over-explaining. You stop giving emotional labor that isn't reciprocated. That step alone transforms your interactions. You go from being reactive to being intentional. Your absence becomes a lesson in boundaries, and boundaries are the foundation of healthy relationships. This kind of intentional absence forces growth for both parties. They learn to evaluate their own behavior. They are confronted with the reality that someone they assumed would always be there can actually withdraw. And you, on the other hand, learn that your value isn't measured by constant availability. You learn that protecting your peace and energy is more important than seeking immediate reactions or forcing closure. Removing access, done wisely, strengthens both awareness and emotional discipline. When comfort is gone, people either step up or step back. Either way, clarity emerges. Those who value you will recognize their mistakes and make an effort. Those who don't will fade away, showing you who truly deserves your presence. And in that process, you gain control, you gain peace, and you learn the power of presence and absence in shaping relationships. Let me explain why detachment shifts power back to you and why it's far more effective than confrontation or blocking. Most people think strength is reacting, responding, arguing, or demanding answers when someone hurts them. They believe that by speaking up, they regain control, prove a point, or show that they won't be taken lightly. But what they don't realize is that reacting gives the other person something to respond to. It keeps them engaged, gives them a way to defend themselves, and allows them to avoid reflecting on their own behavior. When you detach instead, you remove that control entirely. You stop giving them material to respond to. You stop feeding the narrative. And that's when the power shifts back to you. Detachment is not coldness. It is discipline. It is awareness. It is realizing that your energy and your peace are far more valuable than proving a point to someone who may never fully understand or appreciate them. By stepping back, by choosing not to react, you are not being weak. You are showing the kind of self-respect that forces others to recognize their behavior without you saying a word. It's a subtle, silent power that impacts far more than confrontation ever could. When you detach, you stop being predictable. People who are used to reacting from you can no longer anticipate your behavior. They no longer know how to push your buttons. That unpredictability makes them think twice before repeating the same mistakes. Detachment doesn't just protect you emotionally, it creates consequences for the other person that no words or arguments ever could. It forces them to face the results of their actions without distraction or drama. Detachment also gives you clarity. When you are emotionally involved, it is hard to see things as they really are. You focus on explanations, justifications, and excuses either from yourself or from the other person. You get lost in the chaos of emotions and lose sight of reality. When you detach, you gain perspective. You start noticing patterns in behavior. You start recognizing intentions. You start seeing effort where it exists or the lack of it where it doesn't. Detachment allows you to observe without distortion, which is a powerful tool in making better decisions about who and what deserves your energy. Another reason detachment shifts power is because it stops the emotional roller coaster. When you engage in arguments or explanations, you are giving away your energy to someone who may not value it. Detachment ends that cycle. You reclaim your focus, your time, and your mental space. Your energy is no longer tied to their responses or lack thereof. You become steady, composed, and self-directed. That steadiness is attractive and commanding even without words. It demonstrates that your well-being is not dictated by anyone else's actions. Detachment also forces the other person to reflect. When they no longer have your constant engagement, they feel the absence. They can no longer rely on your reactions to soothe or validate them. That discomfort can be more impactful than a confrontation because it forces self-examination. They start noticing their mistakes and your value, sometimes for the first time. Detachment teaches without yelling, without explaining, without dramatics. It's the quiet lesson that carries the deepest weight. Finally, detachment is a practice of self-control. It teaches you to respond from intention rather than emotion. It ensures that your peace comes first and that you are no longer giving your power away to someone else's mistakes or misbehavior. By detaching, you shift power back to yourself, regain clarity, and protect your emotional well-being in a way that reaction, confrontation, or blocking could never achieve. Let me tell you something most people don't fully understand. Absence forces reflection, and it hurts in a way that reaction never can. When someone hurts you, your instinct is often to react immediately. You want to speak, explain, demand answers, or even block them to show them the pain they caused. And while all of that might feel satisfying in the moment, it doesn't leave a lasting impact. True impact comes from stepping back, from creating space, from allowing your absence to speak louder than any words ever could. Absence doesn't just remove your physical presence or your responses, it removes the emotional energy they've become accustomed to. And that absence is heavy. It lingers. It forces them to think, to feel, and to reflect on the consequences of their behavior. When you remove yourself without slamming the door, without giving them an immediate explanation, it triggers something deep inside them. Suddenly, they realize you're no longer available on demand. They notice that the messages they used to take for granted are no longer answered immediately or sometimes at all. They feel a gap where your presence used to be. That gap is uncomfortable, and discomfort forces introspection. It makes them revisit their actions. It makes them consider how they treated you, how they ignored your feelings, or how they mismanaged the space you gave them in their life. This kind of reflection is deeper than any argument could ever achieve because it comes from self-awareness rather than reaction. Absence also forces them to confront their own behavior without deflecting blame. When you engage in arguments, explanations, or emotional outbursts, it's easy for someone to turn the situation back on you. They can say, "You're too sensitive," or "You're overreacting," or "You're making it a bigger deal than it is." That's how conversations often go. They shift focus from their actions to your response. But when you step back and remain absent, there's no response to manipulate. There's no emotional ammunition to twist. There's nothing for them to blame but their own choices. And that kind of forced reflection is uncomfortable in the best possible way. It's a mirror that shows exactly how they acted without any distortion or distraction. Absence also creates curiosity, which is a powerful tool. When someone realizes you are no longer as accessible, they begin to wonder. They begin to replay past moments in their mind, noticing the little things they may have taken for granted, the way you supported them, the times you forgave, the moments of patience they assumed would never end. That curiosity turns into awareness, and awareness turns into understanding. By simply not being there as much, you allow them to feel the weight of their actions without you having to say a word. Your absence does what arguments, explanations, emotional confrontations never could. It creates internal reckoning. Furthermore, absence teaches you self-respect and strengthens your emotional discipline. Walking away without reaction requires patience, restraint, and control over your own impulses. It's not about punishing the other person, it's about protecting your peace and